So welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and this is of course going to be a return to a siege battle, and this is CARN DUM, which is another one of those wedding cake like settlements with lots of layers that you can go up. And obviously this can be very useful for the defenders. It means that they can put their archers in particular into very nice positions within the interior of the settlement as well as just along the outer walls. You know, CARN DUM, it's kind of like if Minas Tirith was like really low on the old property value front. It's a good settlement to defend, however there are these more wide open areas which the attackers, if they have superior numbers, can make use of if they can break through the choke points. So you'd have to keep that in mind if you're the defenders. If you are going to hold some choke points, you need to put a lot of resources into doing so, because if you lose one, you could end up losing two other defensive positions as well. So it is potentially a map that you can fall into a few pitfalls on. However, there is no doubting the fact that certainly ranged units on the defending side can be used to brutal effect, considering the elevation advantage that you often have. But I think we will go for the attackers first of all, because it was one of the attackers who sent me the replay, and it's J-Monster, so it's good to have a replay from him, and he was quite eager for me to do this one, so I'm expecting big things. An alliance of men and dwarves are marching on CARN DUM today, and J-Monster is going to be playing as Numenor. Numenor, certainly an infantry powerhouse for factions, so they should do quite well here, especially considering they're alongside both of the dwarven factions today, so there's a lot of heavy infantry that's going to be bearing down upon CARN DUM. The Remena Abarim are a very strong line infantry unit, mainly because they have very high base attack, which means that they can do their killing quite quickly. In comparison to some of the other line infantry units of a similar cost, you know, they may lack something in the defensive skill department, but obviously it's still a good value. It's just not as high as something like the Alcarondas Legion, or certainly not as high as elven line infantry units of a similar cost, but they do kind of make up for that with the fact that they kill things more quickly than those units, so swings and roundabouts. And then, pushing up the ram, we have a unit of Remena Nardukadar, which of course combine all the benefits of spears with a bit of AP as well, so it obviously makes them just that little bit more deadly, particularly against infantry, because I do feel as though against cavalry, spears will already do well. Obviously AP certainly won't hurt them in that regard either, but AP really makes spears a little bit better when it comes to fighting infantry, and of course that's primarily what they're probably going to be doing in a settlement like CARN DUM. Also got some Pharazim Swordmasters, which is where our Pharazon himself is going to be today, and that makes a good deal of sense. There's less need for cavalry in a situation like this, at least not to the extent that you would see in a more open map, and the Pharazim Swordmasters of course are very strong in melee, huge base attack as you would expect from a Swordmaster unit of this kind. They also have a slight shield value as well, so they won't be quite as vulnerable to missiles over the long haul as some of their peers would be. Also have some more Remena Nardukadar. We have a Trebuchet, which has undergone some fairly significant changes in 0.97. It's now much more accurate, even more accurate than the Catapult actually, while still maintaining higher damage. However, it does have significantly less ammunition. I do think that's a worthwhile trade, because too often in the past, Trebuchet has just sort of impotently fired its ammunition all over the map. But now, you know, it's actually worthwhile to bring it for its very high cost, because obviously it is more expensive than a Catapult. But over a long period of time, you might want the more ammunition of a Catapult, depending on the positioning. I think if you're the defender, especially, a Catapult might be a preferable alternative. Excuse me. Ugh. My voice is abandoning me, it seems. We have some Adunheim Shadow Bows as well. Unsurprising to see Rangers on the attack, of course, because of how much damage they can lay down. But even less surprising, I think, to see Javelins. The Seafarers of Nindamos in particular, just because they combine a huge base damage with being pretty decent in melee, so they're going to be an all-round good unit to have in a siege battle like this. You know, honestly, the amount of damage they can dish with their javelins is probably similar to some of the higher tier javelins, really. They don't have a lot of ammunition, but honestly, I would take the higher base damage all day long, because all you need from javelins is a few good volleys, and they've already completed their objective, really. It's only the really cheap javelins that you really want to get some consistent volleys off with, because they don't do as much damage per shot. Balagar archers, so just to obviously engage the enemy at range with their bucklers, and their, well, they don't have the armour upgrade, so their armour will be fairly average, but even so, they're still very much built for being a skirmish unit. Remena Boabarim, so obviously a bit of AP archers as well, so certainly going for a bit of a mixed army here. I think it's worthwhile for Numenor to go into a bit of a more supporting role, especially considering where they're starting, so that certainly makes a good deal of sense. Not a huge amount of infantry here, but I'm imagining they're going to be letting the others handle that aspect of this battle. And then some Naru and Aru Sentinels, obviously very nice pikes, which if they get into position in a choke point is going to be very good, as well as having that inspiration bonus that the Naru and Aru units have. Then, next to him, we have the Dwarves of Khazad-dûm, played by MSQ2. He's got some Dwarven Miners in here, as well as some 4th Legion Shield Guard without the armour upgrade, but of course Dwarven Infantry. Still very, very solid even without the armour upgrade, so several units of 4th Legion, some units of 3rd Legion as well, so going for the slightly higher tier line infantry that CARN DUM can have again. This is something else which is on the upper end of the scale when it comes to line infantry. They may not have their armour upgrade here, but even so, they're going to be very, very good in melee with those axes, allowing them to deal more base damage. We also have some warriors of CARN DUM, so they do actually have the more basic variant as well with their new unit model. Obviously cheaper, not quite as good as the 3rd Legion, but they are more numerous, and it will of course allow CARN DUM to go very heavy into their infantry, which will gel quite nicely, I think, with Numenor's army. Also some more warriors of CARN DUM over there, and then his elite units I imagine are back here out of harm's way, including the sentries of CARN DUM, also with the same unit model now of course. So some pikes obviously hoping to avoid the fate of being shot early on. They may have good armour, but you still want to keep pikes out of harm's way of archers if you can possibly help it. Some orc hunters of CARN DUM as well with their new unit model, I was going to say, not armour upgrade, unit model. So obviously CARN DUM having that long range option that Erebor do not. I've said before that I think that crossbows are the superior option in this patch, certainly, especially for the dwarves. But even so, it's something that CARN DUM can hold over Erebor, that little bit of extra range. And then finally, the General's Bodyguard, the Meteorial Guard. So going instead of the guards of CARN DUM with their 3 hit points, he's going for the Meteorial Guard with their armour piercing. So we'll see if that pays off for him in the long run. Then we have the second Kingdom of Man, which is Secretariat, playing once again as Rudaur. He seems to like Rudaur, and I'm very much on board with that. I like Rudaur as well. Rudaur will also offer a bit more in terms of numbers than the other 3 will, and they are still a very strong infantry faction as well, albeit in slightly different ways. So a very potent attacking quartet here as they march on CARN DUM. We have some Rudaur clansmen with the armour upgrade, good shields with the armour upgrades, very good at absorbing arrow fire. Not great in melee, but not as bad as you might expect. They have better base damage than some other spears of a similar type, but obviously the spear malice cuts into that regardless. Rudaur Axemen, they need to be very careful, of course, of coming under range fire because they have very poor armour values, and obviously their defensive values in general are not brilliant, but they do offer a pretty decent amount of damage, especially with the axes being AP. They could be very useful on the front line if used at the right time. More clansmen. He's gone for some Dunman Hunters as well, so just some cheap archers to put some pressure on the defenders over a long period of time, because obviously they're not going to do a ton of damage to most units. Granadine Berserkers, multiple HP now, very, very strong. They obviously throw their axes and then they charge into melee. Very, very good unit, albeit quite expensive. Probably more likely to see them in a siege like this than on a field battle, to be honest with you, because of course you can only have one before the red limit is reached. And if you have them on a field battle, they will probably be one of the targets that cavalry will want to go after, because unlike javelins, which can massacre cavalry, if they get a volley off, heavily armoured cavalry can withstand a volley from axe throwers because they are not AP. Admiral's Stroll Hunters, on the other hand, cavalry would certainly not want to get involved with, because of course spears, heavily armoured spears in melee, are nasty javelins at range. Granadine Pikemen, very, very nice unit of pikes, obviously with their shields to obviously buff them up a little bit against archers. And then Witch Realm and Slavers, very nice units of AP shock units. And then finally, we of course have the other Dwarven faction in Erebor, played by Sidious307. I rate Erebor quite highly in this match, honestly. Even though their morale is certainly not as strong as CARN DUM, I do feel as though their roster has got some very, very nice tools in it. The Dragon Slayers, which are of course the equivalent to the Meteorial Guard in the Erebor roster, so a bit of AP there. More AP from the Axe Guard, 2 units of them. We also have some Erebor Legionaries, which again are the upper end unit of line infantry that Erebor can have with their new unit model, with their sort of diamond axes. Very, very nice, of course, on the front line, or at least they should be. Ironfoot Warriors, so again going for a lot of infantry, which is good to see. You know, they obviously will be able to put a lot of pressure on them with the proper support. Ironfoot Spears here as well. There's some Ironfoot Pikes pushing the Ram. That's an interesting choice. With the proper support, this infantry should be able to do very, very nicely for itself. More Ironfoot Warriors pushing up another Ram. Tons of Rams that he's brought. Ironfoot Axe Throwers, so good to see some Axe Throwers actually. I don't know if the Trollshire Axe Throwers are in Rudaur's roster, but they are still very useful. They may not be AP, but as we saw in the last battle with the Shield Maidens, they can do tons of damage very, very quickly to the right targets, especially if the defenders have got pikes just out in the open. Axe Throwers are ideal against them. And then we have some Ironfoot Crossbows and of course the mighty Blacklock Engineers, which is where the General's going to be actually. Just the Meteorial Guard and the Blacklocks. Erebor can bring a lot of multiple HP units in this situation, but I suppose they are the attackers. They had to cut back somewhere. Now let's have a look at the defenders, and we have a real mishmash of armies here. We have Harad, played by Tommy Wiseau. We have Lothlorien, played by Matt Rasp 30, and I believe we have Isengard, played by someone. We'll get on to them in a moment. Some Karen Amroth Rangers. They put the stakes down. I imagine they will retreat quite quickly though, because they really don't want to be in harm's way early on, because Rangers are so powerful. We also have some Saturn Warband, nice AP spears, going to be very useful against quite a lot of the troops. The Lorien units in particular I think are going to form the basis of this, because a lot of their units are of high quality. Lorenan spears, we've got some spears of the wood as well, some more Lorenan spears. And then we have some Loranand warriors as well, which is something which most of the other Elven factions do not have access to, a dedicated AP shock unit. So very nice with the axes as well. Certainly one of my favourite units from Lothlorien, just because of the fact the other elves don't really have that. Mirkwood do, but it's in a hybrid unit. Loranand Axemen, their line infantry unit, obviously using axes as well, means they're a little bit more focused around damage than perhaps the more defence for orientated Imladris Guardians. Loranand Archers, Loranand Swordmasters, and some more Southron Warbands, so primarily a Lothlorien defence over here. So it's going to be tough for Rudour in particular, because Lorien will very much like their chances in melee against them. We got some, actually no, Rudour are there, aren't they? So it'll be actually against Erebor. Still, AP there. Southron Archers already opening up on Rudour, and considering their lower quality overall, Rudour is certainly the best target they could hope to go after with the lower armour. We have some Trollmen of Harad. We know how powerful they can be, of course. They will rip their way through particularly armoured targets, so I'm actually surprised they're over here against Rudour. Southron Pikemen, as well as upgraded dismounted Serpent Guard. Looks like a little bit more of a Haradrim flavour here on the middle gate. More pikes and more Serpent Guard. More Trollmen being backed up by some March Wardens in the wood with their poison arrows. And more Southrons up on that wall. And then I would imagine we're going to transition into Isengard, played by Captain Gervais. He's got some Uruk-hai archers on the wall, of course, again, low quality, but they will at least put some pressure on the attackers. The crossbows, on the other hand, will be very, very useful. Just the fact that the attackers aren't the only ones with crossbows means that Isengard can respond in kind. If they get into the right position, they can do tons of damage to any of the attackers very, very quickly. Snaga Skirmishers, some half-orc Bane Guard, so good to see them. They're obviously a little bit more durable individually than something like the Reapers, albeit more expensive and there are less of them. Uruk-hai Berserkers, naturally very low defensive values with multiple HP, lots of damage. Combination of the infantry and pikes, the classic Isengard front line getting ready to hold the gate. We have some Bane Guard over here. We have more Snaga, of course, the mighty Trolls of the White Hand, getting ready to crack some skulls. Some Guards of Orthanc and some Nazghai, so pretty much the entirety of the Isengard force is banking up against Khazad-dûm and Númenor. That's a very tough gate to hold against those two. We also have some support up here from Uruk-hai infantry, some Dunland Berserkers. The Isengard Ballista could be an interesting addition here. We have the Mahud Beast Hunters, we have some dismounted Serpent Guard, once again upgraded. We have some Mahud Beast Hunters, some Hashari Stalkers. Good to see the Rangers out in force for the defenders, they will need them. Some Demons of the Desert, very, very powerful unit of Javelins, of course. And then we have some Loranand Axemen, Loranand Swordmasters, Loranand Warriors, and some Karas Galadhon's Guardians. I think there's a couple of units in the TC as well. There is Kindred of Celeborn, Watch the Golden Wood. So you can see there's a lot of elites for the defenders, as you would expect, seeing as they're outnumbered. We'll see how they are used throughout the fight. So the Serpent's Fangs, obviously poison arrows on these lads as well. Higher tier archers for Harad. Champions of Nafrat, and then of course a Haradrim Catapult as well. So pretty interesting to see how this is going to go. I would be very tempted to give the edge to the attackers here just because of the armies that are on display. They should work very nicely with one another, and all four of them are very capable on the attack in a siege like this. I think a lot of it's going to come down to how well the defenders can organise themselves and respond to the threats that each army poses, because it's a different puzzle for each one, to be honest with you. And we shall see, I think. But without further ado, let's begin. Obviously already we can see that the towers are actually firing away at Rudour as they move in, with the Rudour clansmen leading the way, but you know, this is unlikely to do tons of damage to them, and of course the Southron archers may be shooting into them, but the big shield value on the Rudour clansmen combined with the heavier chainmail that they are now wearing because of their armour upgrade should be enough to mitigate a lot of this damage. You can see that very few of them are dying here despite taking a lot of arrows. Of course some of them will fall, but just the fact they're going to be able to weather this storm better than most other units in the Rudour roster is a worthwhile endeavour for Rudour to come forward, of course. But this does mean this sort of early committal forwards means that I think the others are going to have to pick up the pace. I mean, Khazad-dûm are right there anyway, so they can start attacking the Isengard gate also. But Erebor and Númenor are going to have to get into position fairly quickly, especially Erebor, so that they can start besieging this gate as well. They definitely need to come collapsing in on the settlement all at the same time. That's really the best thing you can do as the attackers. If you can do that, you're really putting the defenders in a really awkward position. Whereas if you attack at different times, it does allow them to focus down individual parts of your army first, which is what they really want to do. Southron archers, this is the problem with being on the wall as well. When they get too close, obviously the archers tend to have to shoot right up into the air and the accuracy just goes into the toilet. But they are now going after the Axemen, I should say, at least. Which obviously much better targets than the Clansmen. Lower armour, no shields at all, and you know, more dangerous in melee, honestly. At least to Isengard. To be honest, the AP won't be terribly handy against Harad, and also against Lothlorien, while they do have better armour than Harad. The skill should still be enough to allow them to fairly easily defeat Rudour Axemen in melee. Very basic axemen, of course, the Rudire axemen. Their main selling point is the fact they can hide anywhere. Very useful on a field battle, or at least a more open battle than this, but when you're on the attack, you know, there's really no ambushing the defenders. They're going to stay behind their walls. This is a pretty bold move, however, as we can see CARN DUM pushing forward just their miners. And this is going to be something that they are punished for quite dearly, because this unit of Uruk-hai Berserkers will absolutely monster these miners very, very easily. Of course, the miners, again, they have a unique selling point for a militia unit. They're AP, but the Uruk-hai Berserkers don't even wear clothes, really, let alone armour. So yeah, all of a sudden, all of these units of Dwarven miners are going to get stomped into the dirt because they have no stronger units coming up with them. There's not even a single unit of 4th Legion up here to give them any sort of support. And this is a good move from Isengard. He's caught the Dwarven player out a bit here, and this is going to be a lot of good kills. Even if they lose a couple of Berserkers, it's still going to be worthwhile because it's a lot of manpower that they're going to be taking away from the attackers. The Dwarven miners may not be the cornerstone of their assault, but, you know, over the course of a long battle, they are still going to lose a lot of manpower in this situation. Rudire piling through the gate now. Well, they've opened the gate at the very least. You can see here the miners, I think they're going to try and surround the Berserkers, which is definitely the right thing to do, but this one unit of miners is getting absolutely mulched, and also you can see that the Uruk-hai crossbowmen are up here. I would definitely say that this is a waste, however. The Uruk-hai crossbowmen are far too valuable a resource to be spending on miners. As much as I approve of the aggressive moves here made by Isengard, I've got to get in a bit of criticism as well. You can see that CARN DUM are now sending forward some support as well, so they're sending forward a unit of 3rd Legion, although I'm not really sure that's going to be enough either. Trolls of the White Hand and Uruk-hai Berserkers together is a very, very deadly combination. Another unit coming out of here as well, and I think, yeah, that's Snaga Skirmishers. Isengard already spending a lot of their range power. The Dwarven miners now having a way into the settlement as well, you know, piling into the Snaga, and they will do a decent amount of damage there. Albeit, you know, I would actually be quite happy with this in a weird kind of way if I were the CARN DUM player. Just because now these units are outside, and you can see the J-Monster is obliging with a bit of support from his Balagaya. But also just the fact that these crossbows are using up so much of their ammo so early. Like I've said, I think crossbows are very powerful in 0.97. You could argue that they're the same as they always were, but they feel, just in relation to how the changes have been made, I feel as though they're strong, and it's one of the real tools the defenders have here, and I don't know. If all I had to spend was the majority of my miners to kill off Berserkers and Trolls of the White Hand and lose, well, bleed some ammunition from my opponent, I'd probably take that. I'm sure this wasn't what the Dwarven player had in mind, but you can make this work to your advantage. Meanwhile, these miners over here, they tried to catch the Snaga out, but of course the Uruk-hai infantry moved forward very, very quickly to block that and put an end to that nonsense. Rudire, meanwhile, has sort of pulled back from the gate. They've just got everything set up. I say pulled back, the Rudire axemen did come up here, but they were immediately met by Trollmen of Harad and were sent running for the hills. Yeah, not terribly surprising that. Trollmen don't have the highest armor values anyway, multiple HP. They did get a few kills, to be fair, the Rudire axemen, showing their high damage values, but the Trollmen were always easily going to be able to bring that. They're quite lucky, actually, the Rudire axemen returned. Secretariat should probably retreat them and use them a little bit later on. Erebor slowly but surely making their way to this wall as well. Probably going to be setting up their siege as well. Rudire is doing the right thing here by not moving in immediately. They're going to wait until Erebor's in position as well, because if they moved in first, they would just be focused down and destroyed. Over here, however, is still where the majority of the action is happening. Yeah, these Uruk-hai Berserkers at this point have been worn down. A combination of those Balagaya archers in the distance and some slightly more elite units in the shape of the 3rd Legion coming forward. There's also dead trolls here, so again, I'm not really sure at this point whether this was worth it from Isengard. Because if you look at CARN DUM's army, it's still very intimidating. And now they're going to be backed up by Numenor as well. It was a worthwhile thing to do, don't get me wrong. These Uruk-hai infantry are sort of retreating back into the pike block. They're going to allow the miners to run. Snaga javelins getting a few pot shots on the miners as they retreat. And honestly, getting the Snaga skirmishers up on the wall and having them throw into the miners probably would have been a more worthwhile thing to do, because the Snaga skirmishers are so cheap and they still offer a decent amount of damage quite quickly. Or the archers, like the Uruk-hai archers would have been a better choice as well, just because of their cheap nature and the fact that they're not generally going to do a lot of damage to most of Numenor and CARN DUM's roster. The miners would be an exception there. They would get kills on them. The Berserkers, of course, will fight to the death. Just one left now, but you're not going to see the Berserkers running for the hills. They will have their death in glorious combat. Still, these towers are firing away at the attackers, though, which is worth mentioning. These towers, while they won't do crippling damage, it is still something to sort of encourage you to pick up the pace when you do get close to the walls. And again, the Uruk-hai crossbowmen are shooting, but this feels like an unsightly waste to me. You could argue the 3rd Legion, but they don't really have the best of shots either. Like crossbows, if you get them in an ideal shot, they're so lethal. Please don't tell me he's going to fire right up into the air. Okay, good, he's blank firing. I was going to say, like, these crossbows are in decent positions to attack as they come across the bridge, but I don't know, like, miners and 3rd Legion, not really all that worthwhile to my eye. Most of Rudauer's army is still quite far away, actually. You can see here the Dunman Hunters across the river, the moat, I should say. Excuse me, my voice. They are now retreating. They've been sort of trying to absorb a bit of arrow fire, I think, from the defenders. The Southron archers have been obliging behind this little dirt verge. But they haven't really been able to return fire, so it's 3 kills for the Southron archers, and it does take away a bit of the range pressure that the attackers can put on. Iron for axe throwers coming forward, manning the ram, and they are going to try and knock the gate down. They will succeed in that as well. I wonder what the axe throwers would want to go after here. We see some Loren-armed axemen coming up here. The Ironfoot warriors have actually managed to get up here unopposed. I think that's maybe a little bit, you know, the defenders caught napping here. They really shouldn't have allowed the dwarves to get a space up on this wall unopposed. Because now it's too late. The Ironfoot warriors will be able to secure a position up here. I mean, the Loren-armed axemen should kill them in melee. But this could have been a much, much easier fight if they were killing the Ironfoot warriors one by one as they jumped down onto the wall. Now they're going to have to engage in a much more even fight, which the Ironfoot warriors should still lose against the Loren-armed axemen, especially with the support they're going to get from the March Wardens and the poison arrows. But the Ironfoot warriors will at least be able to extract more of a toll from the Loren-armed axemen than they otherwise would have done. Ironfoot warriors obviously with those dwarven swords out, sort of thick, stumpy blades. Yeah, the Loren-armed axemen. It says defeat seems certain. That should change pretty quickly, unless it's a matter of friendly fire here. But yeah, with the range support as well, it should be a very easy task. You can see over here, the Ironfoot warriors are going to be surrounded on all sides by the Loren-armed axemen. Still says defeat seems certain, which I find weird. Like, the Loren-armed axemen are certainly a stronger unit than the Ironfoot warriors. CARN DUM bashing down that gate. Bodies all over that area already from the early engagements. And now we can see some Ironfoot spears also pushing in. Axe throwers using their payload. Not really worthwhile on the spears of the wood, I'd have to say. They're still getting kills, but still. With your sort of high damage skirmishers, that's often where the battle can be decided in a siege. You need to use it on the right targets. Here though, the Ironfoot spears in the vanguard, but they're colliding with the Elven spears, and the Loren-armed spearmen are a cut above the basic dwarves. March Wardens of the Wood still firing away. The Mahout Beast Hunters are in position now, and I think, what are they firing at? They're firing into the dwarves coming through the gate. Ironfoot warriors following the spears in, so the spears with their mass, and hopefully they're getting into formation. It's kind of difficult to tell when they're all bunched up like this. But the shield wall would certainly help if they want to engage in a bit of pushing. And then the warriors obviously adding the benefits of line infantry to the front line as well. Bouncer forces is evenly matched, which I'm still very surprised about. The Loren-armed axemen should be able to tidy up this fight, especially with range support, quite easily. If they can't, that speaks quite poorly of them as a unit, to be honest with you. Yeah, victory seems certain. That's... if that can't be turned around, I mean... this is obviously not a fair test, because obviously the Lorien archers will turn this fight around, but I'd be very disappointed in the Lorien axemen if they couldn't beat Ironfoot warriors on a wall like that. Meanwhile, Rudauer having another bite of the cherry here as the Rudauer clansmen come up onto the walls. That's a really mismatched fight as well. The Trollmen of Harad will crush them. Some of the outer walls of CARN DUM being taken down. Yeah, these clansmen are probably not going to make too much in the way of progress. These ones over here did manage to get up onto the wall in greater numbers, alongside some of the axemen as well. So these Trollmen might get overwhelmed, but I kind of doubt it, because again, they're very strong. But also they're receiving some close range support from the Loren-armed archers, which are high damage archers as well, and the clansmen have their backs to them as well, so they're considerable shield value. Not really coming into play there either. Khazad-dûm sort of reforming their assault after the initial phases. Numenor and Khazad-dûm taking things a little bit more slowly after the initial engagements. Rudauer, I'm a little bit worried by how stretched their army seems to be, because they're not going to win this fight over here in this manner. They have to have Rudauer Axemen over there as well. They did manage to catch some Southron archers, which is good. But let's go and see what's happening over here. Erebor is where the vast bulk of the action is happening now. Beast Hunters, I don't know if they've already used up all their ammunition. I kind of doubt it. They're getting into melee, and they are AP in melee as well. They're not brilliant in melee with regards to their stats, but the AP will still be nice against the Dwarves. The Dwarves not enjoying this fight too much though, and they'll be enjoying it even less when the Lorenan warriors get into play. Yeah, this is very disappointing. A very poor showing by the Lorenan Axemen. For a unit I thought so highly of with regards to their concept and what their stats are, they've just been bent over by Ironfoot warriors, and they had some range support as well. Exceedingly disappointing. If that were Erebor Legionaries, that would be a different matter, because they're units on a similar pricing scale, and the Erebor Legionaries with their heavier armour might be better in this sort of situation, but Ironfoot warriors... yeah, not impressed. Not impressed at all. Lorenan warriors rather trying to get in here as well. You can see still those March Wardens of the Wood firing in. Of course, the Dwarves very good, generally speaking, at absorbing arrow fire, especially from the front like this with their heavy plate and their shields. But the poison arrows coming into effect here as a lot of these Dwarven units are starting to waver now. You can see the Mahud Beast Hunters are charging in. Another unit that's out of ammunition, I would assume, pulling out those little clubs they have, adding yet more AP to the front line. But the Dwarves seem to be here to stay for the time being. Unless they can force them to break with those poison arrows, Erebor could continue to push in. The Axra is targeting the Southron Warband. Get a lot of kills on them, but still. You can see here now the Loredan Swordmasters needed to bail out their disappointing brethren. Meanwhile, Rudauer actually was able... so they are going to be able to clear a spot on this wall, which surprises me, honestly. Here we can see some more Rudauer Axemen charging in through the gate now, and now some decisions I think need to be made. I mean, these two Phalanxes are going to be in position still. Yeah, they're just going to go right up onto the walls and try to help secure this wall. The Phalanxes are static, but they're not really being tested at this point. Dunlending Berserkers are over here. Arrows being shot very highly. Guards of Orthanc are now fighting in the tower itself. I think it's kind of difficult to see. Well, they're just sort of stood here, making sure they can't be used. Jamal's targeting the towers with his trebuchet. I don't know if that's worthwhile, to be honest with you. The towers don't seem to be doing amazing amounts of damage, and the walls are there for the taking if Khazad-dûm and Numenor collapse in all at once, I think, especially considering how the fights are going elsewhere. Rudauer seem to be having some success. They are going to have to pay for it, but, you know, success it will be nonetheless. Dunman Hunters are trying to shoot the Dunlending Berserkers. They're getting a few kills, but it's a very difficult shot to make, so limited success. But Erebor seem to be doing okay for themselves with just their basic Ironfoots. I mean, I think at this point Erebor have committed enough to this fight where they need to keep committing units forward until this layer is theirs, because they have taken losses here. A lot of their units are still over here as well. I mean, these Ironfoot warriors have performed very, very nicely, I must say, but I feel as though that's less the Ironfoot warriors not doing their job, and more the Lorenan Axemen not doing theirs. I mean, I'm still bemused as to how they've lost this fight. But there you go. The results don't lie. Lorenan Axemen are over here again. Lorenan warriors also with their AP. If you can see, there are Erebor Legionaries on the front line now as well, so a very strong unit of Dwarven line infantry coming in to help shore up their gains. I think maybe a couple more units are needed from the Dwarves here, otherwise their assault might start to run out of steam. Especially with the Keren Amroth Rangers coming in, the Dwarves need to smash this line to pieces quickly, otherwise they're going to end up losing a lot of manpower very quickly. At the tip of those Elven arrows, yeah, you can see there, that's not good. Of course, you know, even Rangers, they will have their damage mitigated by shields and the armour of the Dwarves, but you can see that some of the spears that were depleted already ended up breaking as a result of that. Some Iron Foot pikes are moving in now, but considering the Rangers are in position, pikes are really the last thing you want because they will take tons of damage from those body-piercing projectiles, and as if to protect the Rangers, the Southron Warband are parking themselves in the way, albeit they're taking some friendly fire there. So I think they're just going to commit themselves to melee and close the gap. Get the odd kill in melee while the Rangers do the most of the heavy lifting. Lorenan archers out of ammunition, pulling out their blades. Of course, heavy Elven archers are very strong in melee as well. Going after, I think, the pikes and the axe throwers, which are at the back. Good choice there from Matt Rasp. So suddenly Erebor was doing quite well in that situation, but now they've turned the fight around a little bit. Also, trying to wipe Rudauer from the walls with both of their units of dismounted Serpent Guard, which they were successful at. But this was a bit of a green light for Secretariat, I should say, to send forward their Blackwolds. The Blackwolds, however, are going to be far too good a target for the Uruk-hai archers to pass up. As soon as their hit points are gone, archers are like kryptonite to them. Very similar kind of unit to the Uruk-hai berserkers from Isengard, after all. But these trollmen are still holding the line. Like, they've been hopelessly outnumbered for a long time, but they have been mainly fighting Rudauer clansmen, which just aren't capable of the damage to finish the trollmen off, and the trollmen have just been mulching their way through them pretty much continuously. And now the trollmen are receiving support from the archers, and some Serpent Guard are trying to fight their way to them. So it has been quite back and forth already here on the outer defences, but I do feel as though the defenders are doing quite well. But now, flooding forwards, we have CARN DUM leading the way. After taking things a little bit slower after the initial engagements, CARN DUM are now moving forward in force. Numenor are going to be backing them up with some of the support units. The Seafarers of Nindamos will be absolutely excellent against the Uruk-hai pikes and infantry, which form up the basis of Isengard's defence here. There's some Vanguard on the front line adding their AP though, which will be useful against the dwarves. Oof. And that is a very nasty angle that the Isengard ballista has. Very, very well positioned by Captain Gervais. And this means that the dwarves are going to have to be quick. They can't afford to dither now. You know, they're in. They need to make the best of this situation, and they can, if they commit forward enough, smash this Isengard defence to pieces. But I feel as though Erebor made the mistake of maybe being a little bit too cautious when they had the opportunity to destroy the Lothlorien defence on the other side. Will CARN DUM make the same mistake? We shall see. Numenor's units are kind of all over the place. You can see that Numenor have actually, I think, sent over a few units as well to potentially help Rudauer when the time comes. You can see here that the guards of Orthanc, which were up on the walls, well, were up on the siege tower, I should say, are now going to come back down and engage the 3rd Legion. Multiple HP though they may be, they still don't do a lot of damage, the guards of Orthanc, so it'll be a very grindy fight between the two of them. Uruk-hai crossbows. Now would be the time to use the crossbows to shoot into the dwarves from the back up on these walls. And I think that's what these crossbows are doing. Or, no, they've got their blades out, so again, like this, it could have been so much more, those crossbows, if they hadn't used their ammunition earlier. Seafarers of Nindamos chasing off the Snaga skirmishers. Oof. I mean, that is some really, really nasty overwatch fire from the Isengard ballista. The Isengard front line, I think it will crumble eventually, especially with units like the Meteor Guard pushing their way around the flanks. But that Isengard ballista could make CARN DUM pay very dearly for every inch of ground they take from Isengard here. Who knows, I mean, with this amount of damage, it could also be enough to turn the tide of this fight. Uruk-hai crossmen getting into position as well. You can see that more Seafarers are coming forward. I think, yeah, Nazkai against Meteor Guard as well. So, I mean, Isengard are very keen to really make the dwarves pay for this, and that's good. That speaks well of Isengard. They're not just retreating when the going gets tough, they're going to commit forward more units and make it even more costly for the attackers to come through here. Seafarers of Nindamos engaging the Uruk-hai crossbows. They should win that fairly comfortably. But they were out of ammunition anyway by the looks of things with their swords out. Snaga skirmishers using their javelins doing yet more damage to the centre of the CARN DUM line. Yeah, this part of the CARN DUM line is falling to pieces, and that is the Kindred of Celeborn as well. So they came forward quickly, but the defenders responded very well actually to that. Time and time again I've seen the defenders panic in a situation like that and try and retreat. But this time, no. They committed forward more and they turned the tide yet again, and CARN DUM has paid extremely dearly for that. What's happening on the other sides then? Have the attackers got much to show for their efforts thus far? It does not look like it, because Erebor, much like it looks like CARN DUM are going to be, have been forced back outside the gates by a determined defence by the elves. Lorenan Axemen facing the Ironfoot warriors. You can see here that the Southron Warband, I think, are actually going to try and come forward and engage the Ironfoot crossbowmen. Will they get into melee? I think they will, because that was a bit of a weak source volley that they engaged in there. AP though they may be, the Southron Warband's melee stats really won't allow them to win on their own. As part of a complete line, the Southrons can be very good against armoured factions. It gives Harad another one of those facets to their AP nature, but individually it's not like they're like the Citadel Guard, where they can like genuinely defeat heavily armoured infantry on their own. They are going to get some support from some Lorenan Axemen though, so that's good to see. Almost as if Matt Rasp heard me in the past. Axe Guard of Erebor moving forward. Yeah, I mean, I think he... Yeah, I don't think I'd come out and attack though. Like, there's no need. Like, you've already made Erebor pay a lot for coming forward when they did. And honestly, Erebor's army is looking small at this point. All of their army pretty much is concentrated on this bridge, and pushing through here is going to be difficult for them. Meanwhile, Khazad-dûm's army is fighting hard, but yeah, you can see here the Mithril Guard. The Mithril Guard enjoy, for the most part, infantry superiority against most of what they fight, but in the Nazkai they met a worthy opponent, and considering the way that the battle was going elsewhere, the Mithril Guard ended up being utterly vanquished. I think that was the Trebuchet trying to go after the Isengard Ballista, but I think the damage has already been done. The Isengard Ballista already paying for itself, and there you can see the Mithril Guard routing. Who'd have thought? But yeah, very nice defence there from Isengard, I would say. Bit of support from Lothlorien with the Kindred of Celeborn at the right time. They blitzed down the Khazad-dûm assault, and it's not easy to kill Khazad-dûm quickly. It really isn't. But the defenders managed it there. What on earth was that? It's almost like he tried to jump up and then he tripped and fell. One of the dwarves. So now, I mean, J-Monster hasn't really committed forward any of his infantry yet, so it's not as if the attackers are completely out of resources just yet. Paradigm pikemen are up here on the front line, but they're outnumbered pike to pike by the Southrons here. They are far the superior of the Southron pikemen in melee. But I think that this fight is going to be equalised a little bit by the Attenmore's Troll Hunters just in behind, who are going to try and blitz down the Southron pikemen. Southron pikemen are AP, of course, which is a nice little detail to them, but they do pay for that with the fact their stats are even worse than regular pikemen usually are, which of course isn't brilliant. But these Ranadines have been pretty effectively dealt with. I imagine that does partly come down to the archer support. The Serpent's Fangs are here, as well as the Lorenan archers, so it's good to see actually that the defenders, seeing the fact that they've been able to do a lot of damage, they have committed forward some of the units they had way back in the town centre, hoping to do even more damage on the approach. Is that J-Monster's general? No, it can't be. Or is it? No, it can't have been. It was... Well, it must have been the Nazkai, yeah, so it must have been the Isengard general. Seafarers of Nindamos, despite being killed by the Nazkai, managed to take the Isengard general down with them. Not a huge problem, if only because, of course, as the defenders, routing units just go back to the town centre, and even if they're perpetually routing, we've seen in the past them return from the dead and actually make the difference in a fight. We'll see if this one turns out to be as close as all that. There are still some Khazad-dûm units still fighting on the front line, doing their best. But at this point it's very much the dregs of the massive fight that happened before. Baneguard, pikes and infantry facing off against the 4th Legion. Some damage being done there to the Uruk-hai crossbows, again from the Orc Hunters and the Seafarers. And at this point it's time for Numenor to move forward, take up the mantle that Khazad-dûm left behind, and those Kindred of Celeborn opening up once again. Remena Abarim are here. See there the split shot arrows of the Kindred of Celeborn, albeit from the front. The armour and shields of the Remena Abarim should mitigate some of that damage. There's also javelins coming in here. I can't help but feel as though the defenders are running out of melee power over here though, so eventually it's just going to be these ranged units. You can see here that crossbows that are out of ammunition are being committed forward to try and hold the Remena Abarim back for as long as they can. There are some Dunman Berserkers as well, but obviously not exactly the last word when it comes to quality. Archers shooting in the back. It's a really nasty crossfire actually that the defenders set up over here. There's still those guards of Orthanc up on the walls. Uruk-hai infantry and Snarg are trying to hold back the Numenorians. In come some Orc Hunters. They still have ammunition though, they've still got their bows out. In come the Dunlum Berserkers. Can the Remnant about him stay alive long enough under this ranged flurry to kill off all of this infantry? Some of the Seafarers pushing their way through to try and kill off at least the Snaga Javelins. They should be victorious there as well. Other unit of Seafarers going after this unit of Snaga Skirmishers, so I think the attackers are finally going to be able to get something done here. Meanwhile, Erebor's still not too keen to attack again. I feel as though they're probably waiting for the opportunity to come forward, given to them by their fellows on the other side. Did they move forward when I wasn't looking? Because I can't... oh no, the Dragon Slayers are there. So yeah, this is pretty much what they have left. Very costly over on this side for them. The middle gate, still Rudar are trying to utilise their javelins, but it's a difficult thing to do at this point. The Atomor's Troll Hunters are here into the gate, but they're taking a lot of arrow fire from the Serpent's Fangs. The Loranand Archers are out of ammo now and are closing in. It's going to have to be over here, I think, where the attackers are going to have to make the first move. Numenor were the only ones to have unscathed infantry before they moved in here, but now I feel as though that they are moving forward, and despite the punishment that CARN DUM took, Numenor are now going to be able to move in. Kindred of Caliborn, are they going to retreat? The Nazkai could act as a rear guard, and the Kindred of Caliborn could go back up to the second layer. That's probably what I would do. There's no sense in losing the Kindred of Caliborn, because while they are strong in melee, as most Elven archers are, they will lose to the Pharazim Swordmasters. They'll lose a couple of unit models there regardless, the Seafarers bogging them down and killing them. But yeah, they need to force path their way out of here. But of course, Elves are pretty fleet of foot, so they should be able to manage that. And of course, without the support from those Elven units and the Snaga Skirmishers, what's left of the Isengard front line should be easier pickings for the Numenorean infantry. Nicely done. Uruk-hai archers also getting engaged in melee now, and of course they're archer to archer, the Orc Hunters are going to be substantially stronger than the Uruk-hai archers. The Uruk-hai archers really are just a making up the numbers kind of unit, both at range and in melee. Scraps of leather as their armour. Some Loranand archers over here though, so still there is actually more range support coming in from the Elves. Not quite as devastating as the Kindred of Caliborn admittedly, but still, it will still be more unit models that Numenor are going to have to bleed just getting through here. They're going after the Guards of Orthanc, which may not... I mean, I'd probably go after the Sentries. Like the Guards of Orthanc, very thick armour, multiple HP shields. Remen and Ardukadar coming forward now as well. There's still the Adunheim Shadow Bows. What have we here? So I think at this point, seeing the fact Numenor has blown through that defence over there, the defenders are going to retreat to the second layer. Some dismounted Serpent Guard heading up there as we speak. Over here, meanwhile, Erebor have actually moved in, which is brave. They should have the strength to defeat this lot. Yeah, because you can see that the Cairn Amroth Rangers are peeling off. The Dragon Slayers are in here now, so yeah, they should win this. I mean, they will take yet more losses at the hands of the Lothlorien infantry than they already have, but with some crossbow support, with some Blacklock support, they should burn through this defence faster and more efficiently. Obviously, we have the Dragon Slayers of Ered Mithrin tearing up these Loranand Swordmasters. Archer fire coming from on high, I think. Is there? Or is it just from over here? No, yeah, it's the Cairn Amroth Rangers. I think seeing the opportunity to attack the Dragon Slayers as they're sort of sticking out, they are going to go after them, and sort of seeing this, they're going to try and use the Elves as cover. What have we here? Crossbows descending from the wall, I'm not quite sure why. Erebor player needs to make up his mind as to what he's doing here. I mean, he should still win this, but his army is very depleted at this point. He needs to keep, especially the Blacklocks, alive. I feel as though the Blacklocks are going to be sorely needed later. Uruk-hai archers retreating. Snaga skirmishers retreating. Loranand archers retreating. And Rudar should still have a few units as well. Ranadine Rangers. The Witch-Realm Enslavers are still here. Taking pot shots from the towers. That'll be annoying for Rudar. All kinds of CARN DUM firing away, and the rest of the Isengard forces being cleaned up at this point. Victory finally on the first layer for the attackers. A bloody fight it was, and actually more than just the first layer, I think. Because they haven't put up a defense over here, and J-Monster has taken advantage of this by rapidly moving forward. And the ballista, so for as well organised as the defenders have been, a bit of chaos is ensuing here because they clearly have not really readied their defence anywhere near quickly enough. Numenor, these units are a little bit far away from their support. This could backfire on Numenor if the defenders are willing to swamp these units quickly. But that's a big if. And reinforcements will be trying to scurry their way up here as quickly as they are able. And Pharazim Swordmasters, Seafarers and Remen and Ardukadar are not the easiest units to get rid of. Pharazim Swordmasters in particular are going to make a mockery of Serpent Guard. Seafarers of Nindamos are going to move into the ballista to stop it from firing at point blank range. And they are going to succeed at that, albeit the Serpent Guard will probably kill them off in return. Yeah, this is going to be the downside to Numenor doing what they did. Because while I'm sure the defenders were a little bit concerned about Numenor attacking forward so aggressively when they weren't prepared, they can now send forward units like Champions of Nathrat to try and deal with this little incursion. Some very depleted units also coming forward, just being thrown in for extra measure. The Demons of the Desert are also here. They don't have the best of shots, though. I think they're probably best off just using sheer might to overwhelm this Numenor force and saving the Demons of the Desert for later. Shari Stalkers also moving back. This, honestly, is also not the most effective front line. Like, Lorinand Archers and Southron Warband are not going to be enough to hold this Numenorian infantry at bay. The Remen at Balrim are going to be far too strong for them. And I feel as though in the transition here between the first layer and the second layer, the defenders are losing a bit of their composure. Karen Amroth Rangers, I think what they're going to try and do, honestly, is retreat to the final layer at this point, because I think the second layer is already a bit of a lost cause with how disorganised they have been thus far. Lorinand Archers retreating, Erebor victorious finally down here, I think. Indeed they are, and they do have their Blacklocks and their Dragon Slayers still available to them, very powerful units to include here in the late game. What is going on here? Yeah, and Numenor able to get some forces up here as well, some Naruna Aru Sentinels, Snaga Skirmishers routing. Pharazim Swordmasters defeat seems certain, because obviously they are a very strong unit, but they are outnumbered, and also the Champions of Nathrat are certainly worthy opponents. In come some Uruk-hai Archers, also out of ammunition as they may be, and dreadful in melee as they may be, surrounding the Pharazim Swordmasters, and they're going to complete their destruction here. It's all going to be a matter of timing here, I think. All Hunters of Khazad-dûm trying to lay down some support, but it's going to be nowhere near enough to save these Numenorians. And indeed, these dismounted Serpent Guard, rather than charging into the front of the pikes, are going to try and surround the Remen and Ardukadar. And now, Captain Gervais is also going to remount the Isengard Ballista. Yeah, there goes our Pharazon at the hands of the Champions of Nathrat, the mightiest of the Trollmen. There goes the Harad General, though, mutually assured destruction. What's going on here? Yeah, Numenor should be able to get through here with the support of Rudar especially. They still have their Rangers. The Wabarim are over there as well. Not sure what they're shooting at, actually. What are they shooting at? Nothing, it looks like, which is correct. I was going to say, why on earth would he be shooting? The Rangers are trying to shoot in as well, but going after the Hashari Stalkers, Demons of the Desert. It's not the best shot, though, because they're going up into the air. The body piercing is not really going to be useful like that. The Isengard Ballista, I think, got a point-blank shot there. Although I'm not seeing any crispy corpses, so maybe that was just a regular shot. The Adunheim Shadow Bows, though, unlike the Granadine Rangers, do have the angle to shoot into the dismounted Serpent Guard should they so choose. Or the Hashari Stalkers, they could kill off these Rangers very, very quickly. Ooh, and the Serpent's Fangs, with their big two-handed Shotels, killing off the Rudauer General as well. Rudauer, probably one of the attackers with lower morale. Rudauer have got better morale than most evil men, but even so it's likely to suffer in this sort of situation. Ferodrim Javelins pushing through. Demons of the Desert shooting point blank into the Numenorians as they move forward, doing a lot of damage there to the Abarim and the Nardukadar. But at this point, you know, some substantial losses being incurred by the defenders here. It's been a very interesting fight, this, because it's not gone ideally for either the attackers or the defenders. Yeah, like the Hashari Stalkers are really going to be lost without doing really anything in terms of damage. The Demons of the Desert are also not really going to be able to lay down as much damage as I'm sure they would have liked. because they're now being engaged in melee by Numenorian infantry as well as the Witch Realm enslavers. So it's going to be ugly for them. They will of course put up a fight in melee, but it's not really where they want to be when they still have ammunition. And they certainly aren't the powerhouse that the champions of Neferat are. I don't know whether they're going to be able to save this Isengard Ballista. If Rudauer is wise, and Rudauer is wise, they're going to stop this from happening. The Ballista has already done a lot of damage to the attackers. They can scarcely afford it to do even more. Erebor are now arriving, the dwarves slowly shuffling their way around the edge of the map, trying to get into position to help their allies as quickly as they can. Karas Galadhon's Guardians are over here. The Serpent's Fangs took damage on that front line against Rudauer, but they managed to assassinate the Rudauer general. The Ballista crew is going to get away by the looks of things, but I'm not really sure what purpose that will ultimately serve, purely because remounting this Ballista is going to be difficult. Who knows, it might end up being what wins them the game. And I suppose it is better to save them than just leave them to die. But we shall see if that actually comes to anything in the end. Over here, some Demons of the Desert, still fighting hard, but only 10 of them. And obviously it's not as if they're facing off against any old garbage, they're facing off against the very best that Rudauer can deploy. And of course they're very professional Numenorian infantry. They did get a volley off, but that's nowhere near enough really for what you expect from the Demons of the Desert. Potentially the most devastating unit in the Haradrim roster. They can be every bit as devastating as the Witchers, honestly, if you get a good shot off. That's Boabarim over there as well, they still have their bows. That's pretty much everything. There's still some Balagyr archers outside the walls, but that's it. That's the only unit that's outside the walls, and I'm sure J Monster will move them in momentarily. This is a good point though, they're going to need a ram, because now the defenders are holed up in the final layer, the de facto keep of CARN DUM, and we shall see if the attackers still have the manpower. Let's not forget, of course, that the Harad still have that catapult, which in this sort of situation can be a real difference maker. As far as the infantry goes, the one-armed warriors, I mean, they still have the champions of Neferat. They've been in melee, so they're not completely healthy, but they're still a very strong unit, of course. They still have the Watchers of the Goldenwood back here, I'm sure, as well. And they have yet to use any of their ammunition. Their Silverthorn arrows, you know, will be able to knock units around all over the place. But I think I would give the advantage here to the attackers. As strong as some of the Lothlorien units in particular in the town centre still are, and as useful as the catapult can be, I don't think they have the manpower to hold the attackers back. Especially with units like the Reforged Javelins. Like, if they get a few decent volleys off, that could be devastating. But also you still have to consider units like the Dragon Slayers. Numenor still has their Romena Boabarim, which if they get into a good position to shoot will be devastating as well. I mean, to be fair, the attackers don't have tons of elite units here in the late game. Pharazim Swordmasters were killed earlier on. I think it will really come down to who uses their ranged units better. Because obviously the Blacklocks are still alive, which are, you know, the most devastating ranged units still left on the field, I think, even more so than the Ferodrims. But the defenders will have the advantage of the high ground here, and they should have the easier time utilising their ranged units. The Keren Amroth Rangers are being shot. Granadine Rangers trying to shoot them with their body-piercing projectiles, but it's not the easiest shot to make. You can see that a lot of these arrows are going a bit haywire. All the defenders need to do is spread out and weather the storm. They can't afford to lose their cool here. The defenders need to utilise their defensive position here, because there's no way that if they leave this defensive position they're going to win. The attackers are ready to pounce if they do. Dragon Slayer's in position. Balagyr archers now also moving up from outside the walls, of course, and they, you know, their arrows are very much throwaway at this point. They can be used outside here to try and wear down the defenders as they are doing so. Granadine Rangers are trying to get good shots off. You can see that the vast majority of their shots are sort of ending up short and going into the walls. Only a few of them are hitting their mark, and even then they're only really hitting one or two models rather than going through the entirety of the unit. Watchers of the Goldenwood as well are very capable of absorbing a pretty decent amount of punishment as it is. Is there a ram on the way forward? I would hasten to add. There is. The Witch Realm enslavers are pushing it up. With only one ram, however, they're going to have to sort of knock down one gate and then knock down the other, which would go some way to explaining the amount of time left in this fight. Definitely sort of the calm before the storm here. A mid-game skirmish phase. But so far, I feel as though the defenders have done quite well for themselves here. I think in particular, responding to that CARN DUM push was very, very nice. Of course, they ended up paying for it in the end when Numenor came forward as well to crush the defence after it had been softened up a little bit. But still very nice. They did very well against Erebor initially as well, Lothlorien. And in the middle, I think Harad did okay against Rudal as well, to be honest. It took Rudal some time to be able to get through the more limited defence that Harad had laid on. What we've got going on here? Kindred of Celeborn, Watch the Goldenwood. Yeah, not taking tons of losses here. Again, multiple HP. Very, very difficult to burn down with rangers unless you have a very nice shot on them. Well, they need to be careful here. If they get too close to the gates, they will open. And there's Haldia, ready to meet the foe. Sathron Warband perpetually routing. Honestly, it might be worth the attacker's time to try and kill the catapult. We'll see. Thorinarn's Swordmasters here. They're now, I think, the target of the attacker's eye. Still all Hunts of CARN DUM. I mean, certainly the attackers here are going to need their range units to do some good work. Because if it comes down to just them pouring forwards into a choke point, the defenders have got all they need to punish them for that. And neither side have really got tons of really strong melee units left. Champions of Neferat. I mean, I would say I would give the edge to that, to the defenders actually. With the 2 units of elite elven archers and the champions of Neferat. I think Harad still have some Serpent Fangs left, although they're in such small numbers that it's not really going to be, yeah, like 12. It's not a lot. Lorinarn Swordmasters still being slowly worn down. Looks like they're going to try and go through this side first of all. Nirun Iru Sentinels are an interesting unit to have later on as well, buffing the morale of the Numenorian units at the least, and also acting as very strong pikes, albeit the Karas Galadhon's Guardians are on the other side. But I can tell right now what the attackers' plan to deal with them is going to be, and it's these guys, the Ferodrim Javelins. They will almost certainly try to use the Javelins on the Elven Pikes, because if they don't, the Elven Pikes will be able to hold pretty much indefinitely. Ranged is going to be how the attackers are going to have to win this. It's also how the defenders are going to have to win this, to be brutally honest, with their 2 units of elite elven archers and their catapult. Here we go. Surely now they will batter the gates down, because as it is, you know, they need to batter the gates down, to be honest, the attackers, because they're not really going to be able to do tons of damage from this position. Like, they are slowly killing Lorinarn's Swordmasters, but that's not really going to be terribly damaging either way. What's the Bawabrim going after? They're going after Watch the Goldenwood, and that will get kills because of the AP nature of this unit. Lorinarn Swordmasters coming across here. Yes, here we go. Slowly but surely the gates will be destroyed. And then it'll be interesting to see how the attackers actually handle this. Will they send infantry in first and then back that up with their range units, or will they just try and play a game of cat and mouse in and out of the gate? I find that style of play quite frustrating to watch and play, to be quite honest, but there is no doubting that it can be effective sometimes, so I would not hold it against them. There's the Adunheim Shadow Bows as well. Yeah, definitely the attackers have got a lot of range power left. Belagair archers still shooting away. Trying to shoot away at some of these ever dwindling numbers of Lothlorien Swordmasters. And at this point, this choke point is actually fairly undermanned at this point, so the attackers could find it worth their while to push forward quickly with their infantry and try and establish a bit of a beachhead. Kindred of Celeborn are in place though, so I mean, it's when it's too good to be true, it could be seen as a bit of a trap. We'll see. What do the attackers want to do here? Let's have a look actually as we enter into the final phases. The defenders are behind in terms of percentages, but I would say overall they probably have individually the more quality-centric units. But even so, with this, like, yeah, with those percentages and with what they have left, I would definitely back the attackers to go on and win this. I'd be very surprised if they didn't. I do like some of the scenery on this map though. Like, look at this lad over here. Poor guy. He's just hanging out. That was a terrible joke, I'm really sorry. Anyway, we have the ram going to go to the other side, so bloody hell. Come on, guys. Waddle your way into position more quickly, please. Oh no, I thought they were going to have to go right around the ballistas then. But nope. Oh no, what is going on here? What on earth is this? Well, I mean, that was interesting to say the least. The ram is now up here. I thought actually that would have been a way in for the Witch Realm Enslavers, but no. The Witch Realm Enslavers have just marooned their ram right up there. I think based on the amount of frames left, they're not going to bother to go and get another one at least. No, they are. They are. The Trebuchet crew has got this ram now. I can only assume that this battle is going to end quite quickly when it comes down to brass tacks, which does lead me to believe the attackers ultimately will overwhelm the defenders. The slow and painful march of the rams. Now they're going after the catapult crew, which is something I'm surprised they honestly didn't do earlier, because if they can kill the catapult, that's really one of the main tools that the defenders have left that will be gone. Be interested to see actually how much ammunition a lot of these attacking archers still have. Not sure. The Dunheim shadow bows probably still have a decent amount because they haven't been firing this whole time. The Orc Hunters have been firing, but they're a small unit. Belagar archers have just pulled out their blades. The Hranadine Rangers have got their blades out. They have not, however. 31 catapult crewmen left. This ram is moving to the wrong side. You gotta love a good, slow, grindy and dull skirmish phase. Eventually the attackers will move in. I'm sure of it. Dunheim Shadowbows getting into position, shuffling around one another. Oh, they're not going to make the same mistake, are they? Surely not. Nope, they're going to move around the Witch Realm Enslavers and they will be able to get into position. Here we go. Finally. As soon as the Trebuchet crew positions the ram correctly. This is going to be a very fast final phase, I think, and that's because the defenders have to retreat from the choke points because of the Rudau javelins and axe throwers and the Erebor crossbows. But that's going to leave the attackers all of the room they need to move forward and sort of claim the top layer. We'll go back down to 1 speed now because this is assuredly where the final battle is going to begin. Indeed, the Orc Hunters leading the way against the Lorinand Archers. The Lorinand Archers far the superior of the Orc Hunters in melee though. Minor victory perhaps being won here. Perhaps they were thinking they could catch a unit out. Snaga Skirmishers, still alive, still with ammunition. That's something. Maybe the pikes would be better off trying to avoid the Ferodrum Javelins like the plague. What side are the Ferodrum Javelins on? Not this one. So yeah, maybe over this side for the pikes. The pikes are still slowly but surely trying to bleed the defending manpower here, the attackers. In come the Hranadine Rangers to the aid of the Orc Hunters. Javelins being thrown, killing off the odd unit model here and there. Kindred of Caliborn still have ammunition. Their split shot could be brutal. It's not the easiest shot, to be honest with you, for the catapult. The catapult either needs to move a little bit further forward so it can hit the units that are right in through the gate, or it needs to, well, yeah, that's what it needs to do, to be honest with you. I was going to say it doesn't really gain anything from moving backwards. There are the Berserkers and the Ferodrum Javelins. The Dragon Slayers as well. That's a big unit to have later on here. The Dragon Slayers, because there's really nothing that can match it 1-for-1 in melee. Except the Karos Gladhorn's Guardians, if, you know, the Dragon Slayers would just go straight into its phalanx. That would be a long, grindy fight, and the battle would be decided elsewhere before that had a conclusion. Hranadine Rangers pulling out their blades, and with their skill, not any old garbage will be able to defeat them. the best thing about Rangers in melee, their defensive skill. And there are the Ironfoot crossbows, waiting for their opportunity. And in fact, here, the Elves are going to move their Karascaladon's Guardians in, which will turn the fortunes over here. The Granadine Rangers will most certainly lose to them. But this will be the green light, I think, for the Dwarves to move forward their crossbows and to try and shoot them with those ever-powerful bolts. Uruk-hai archers moving in. They're going to try and come in here and, I think, support this position. All of a sudden, arrows flying back and forth. Kindred of Caliborn, the target of a lot of that. Over here, Witch Realm Enslavers butchering the Southron warband that are holding the gate. Unfortunate for them. Yeah, I don't think the defenders have got enough left, to be honest with you. There's some strong units in here, but there just isn't enough of them, I don't think. And all the attackers need is for just a few good volleys from their very powerful ranged units, and it's all over. Granadine Rangers sent packing very, very quickly. The Elven Pikes. The Granadine Rangers foreseeing that they're not really going to get too much done. They're still taking losses from the Snaga Skirmishers, though. And here come the Granadine Berserkers. Karen Amroth Rangers being used as bait, because I don't think they had ammunition. They had their blades out, and now the Silverthorn arrows being utilised. But unfortunately, the Granadine Berserkers have got a clear shot at the Watchers of the Golden Wood. And this is the problem. Like, when you retreat so far back from the choke point, although the Granadine Berserkers at this point, they're going to need more support here, because they are going to get surrounded, albeit on one side by Snaga. There's some split shot arrows as well, though. Yeah, Serpent's Fangs are moving forward. Yeah, like, it's... The defenders have done well in this fight, but at this point the organisation is going to go out the window, because they're trying to avoid the fate of just being shot. I mean, over here they're not really trying to avoid it, they're just trying to close the gap. Nothing antagonises me more than being kited with archers. It's the worst feeling in the world. Everyone knows that ranged weapons are for cowards. Champions of Nafrat are going to come in here now to try and hold back the Dwarven Horde, but the Ferodrum Javelins are here. I mean, the Catapult needs to get some very significant damage done very quickly. It needs to shoot into this blob, to be honest with you. Can't afford to go after small units. Trebuchet Cruiser Router. Split shot arrows being shot to the moon, and yeah, this is another problem that the defenders are having. They're not... I mean, the Silverthorns are shooting into the Ferodrum Javelins. They are finding their mark at least, but being shot right up into the air. And the split shots are not finding their mark at all. That was a pretty decent shot. Can the defenders pull this around? We shall see. Ironfoot crossbow should have a decent shot onto the Karascaladon's Guardians, but the Granadine Rangers will lose that fight in melee pretty quickly. Can the Lothlorien Archers do their thing? I mean, they absolutely need to kill off the Ferodrum Javelins. The Ferodrum Javelins are shaken, actually. And now they're sort of moving out into more open ground, where the Elven Archers have a much clearer shot at them. They might actually have been better off standing behind their own men. They would have had, you know, a worse shot themselves, but out here in the open, the Lothlorien Archers are going to make mincemeat of them. Multiple HP as they may be, they're taking losses very quickly here. The Silverthorns in particular have got an ideal shot on them, although they are going to get a few jabbies off. Unfortunately, I just feel as though the Champions of Nafrat and the Serpent's Fangs were really the only thing they had in melee at this point, the defenders, and they don't have enough there, I don't think. Belagair Archers are going to try and stand in the way. Yeah, like, this is another thing. Like, the Elves, they just haven't managed to, in the late game here, position their archers just right. Like, the positioning of these two Elven Archers from Matarasp needed to be perfect, and it wasn't. And I feel as though that's going to be what ultimately does them in here, the defenders, because melee-wise, the Dwarves of Erebor are going to be too much for what they had left here. Like, they're relying on Uruk-hai archers partially to try and hold them back. Dragon Slayers of Ered Mithrin are fighting on the front line. There's not enough left of the Champions of Nafrat, nowhere near enough, only 3 of them. So as we head into the last, it was a valiant effort here from the defenders, and it is going to be a very closely fought fight, but ultimately the attackers are going to win. And I feel as though it comes down to the end here. The defenders just didn't position themselves well enough. You could say they didn't pace themselves well enough as well. Like, early on I mentioned how those Uruk-hai crossbows were not really being used on ideal targets, and I feel as though here in the late game, 2 units of Uruk-hai crossbows would have been enough to turn this fight around into the defenders' favour, because there's no way that the attackers would have been able to march their way in as comfortably as they have here into the final layer. It goes to show conserving certain key resources for the right moment is important. I'm not saying keep all of your key resources in the final layer, far from it. Like, you know, Isengard did very well to use their ballista and their infantry to crush CARN DUM early on. But even just 1 unit of Uruk-hai crossbows, to be blunt, would have been so vital here in the late game. Small margins and the snowball effect is very much underway. Pike to pike, the Karasgladhon's Guardians will be able to defeat the Naru Sentinels. It's one of the few pike fights that the Númenóreans will not win. But it's not going to matter too much with the support of those Axguard of Erebor charging down their hill. It's going to be grisly here for Lothlorien. As the fight reaches its natural conclusion, the attackers are going to be victorious. Blacklock Engineers also. Do-9 Shadowbows. Not much left though, mostly ranged units from the attackers that are left. A few units of Númenórean infantry, a few units of Dwarven infantry, but that's it. And it is a difficult task. When the defenders are outnumbered, it's always going to be a difficult task, and especially against 4 factions like this. Like, these are 4 factions which, in tandem, are very difficult to face off against. A very nice synergy going on between the 4 of them. But the defenders did okay in the end. The initial Dwarven assaults from Erebor and CARN DUM were very, very well dealt with, I think. The middle engagement wasn't really too significant until later. But here I think Númenor did well as well, as like following CARN DUM in as quickly as they were able, not allowing the defenders to relax after their victory. And in the end it's mostly Númenorian stuff we have left. Númenor and Erebor with really the only significant units left, especially Númenor. Erebor with even less. Over here, what's left of the Karasgladhon's Guardians being taken down by some more Dwarven units. Very well played by all players though, not an awful lot wrong, like I would say. Really the main thing I would say are those Uruk-hai crossbows being misused, and even then it was part of a good idea from Isengard to sort of counter-attack into the weak Dwarven miners that have been sent forward without support, so you can't really take too much away from Captain Gervais for doing that. Matt Rass with surprisingly the fewest amount of kills, I suppose. I guess that's because his archers, you know, in the late game he had saved them, but he didn't make ideal use of them. That is something else I would say. Like that Elven Archer positions needed to be perfect, and they weren't. So that's something else maybe you could say as a mark against the defenders. Harad did well as well. Like, they didn't do anything spectacular, but neither did they do anything wrong, I would say. Their catapult, you know, it wasn't really their fault that the catapult was destroyed, because while the Elven Archers are free to move around more freely, the catapult is much more difficult to manoeuvre, so they were always going to try and focus that down. I think Númenor did very well. Obviously J-Monster did very well. Obviously he's very used to the game, so you'd expect that. The Dwarves getting a lot of kills, albeit, you know, they definitely paid the price early on at Lothlorien's hands, but they definitely turned that around. CARN DUM having a rough time of it, but you know, it's not a glamorous job, but oftentimes in a siege like this someone has to be the one to sort of sacrifice themselves, throw themselves on the pyre. Looking at these factions you'd expect it to be Rudar, but in this case it was CARN DUM. But let's see what did the damage for J-Monster's army. Varazim Swordmasters not as much as you would expect, but they did push forward aggressively and perform a vital service. Unsurprisingly, the Seafarers of Nindamos all doing very well for themselves considering the numbers they were facing off against. Yeah, good kill counts on them, as you would expect. A very, very key part of the Númenor army, especially considering the amount of damage that their javelins can do. There are men at about him also doing quite well for themselves, at least these 2 units. This one was focused down more readily, I think, during the initial phases when they were trying to push through the gate. Naru Sentinels doing okay in the late game as well, and just over 100 kills for the Rangers, but the Rangers in the end ended up just being there more for the threat of the body piercing more than anything, sort of pulling the defenders out of position in the late game in the final layer, and then the infantry doing the rest. So Seafarers and the line infantry for Númenor doing the business as you would expect from an army like this. So yeah, big thank you to J-Monster for sending this one in. That was certainly a very enjoyable fight. Good to see CARN DUM again, the first time we've seen it in 0.97. And as I said, Lango has also sent me a battle on the Garden of Ithilien, which will probably be the next one that I do. So yeah, big thank you to JMods for sending this in, big thank you to all the players for being a part of this entertaining battle. Yeah, and I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.